Conflict. Chapter 5. For the first time in his life Assad felt that things were working out for the better. He had intermediate-level education thanks to the sweat and tears his father shed to put him in school so that he could make something more out of his life than being a daily wage worker, begging people for jobs to put food on the table. Once he graduated from the Polytechnic school, he found a decent in a store that fixed electrical appliances. He could finally help his father and mother and at least give a chance of a decent retirement. He was very young when CYOA first revealed himself to the world. He didn't understand what it meant to be that powerful, the consequences of living in a world of powerful people while being powerless. He simply ran along with friends on the roads, tying towels on their neck and pretending to be capes themselves. When CYOA first visited Africa to help the orphans from the war, people felt hope for the first time. Africa was always treated as a dirty and diseased place. It was called as the savage lands by the Europeans who did not put much effort in learning the culture here. After being enslaved and oppressed for so long by outsiders, the children of Africa became cruel and callous. They couldn't fight back against their overlords for a long time, so all that hatred seeping and collecting within themselves. Once independence was achieved, the people lost their common enemy and turned against each other. So when CYOA appeared, battling the military forces of so many countries to save the orphans, it felt like the people here had their first attempt at uniting and pushing the continent to greatness. It didn't last for long. The golden age of para-humans may have brought the age of heroes in the other nations, but it only brought suffering in Africa. The age of warlords, people who promised protection from the dangers lurking out in the wilds, only to rule over territories with an iron fist. He saw 6 different warlords shift regimes since 1991, with no support from any foreign countries. The people of Somalia were stuck under the heels of their para-human warlords now. Not that he expected much help. Somalia was always known as the land of pirates to the rest of the world, so it was easy to treat us the villains and not care about the common people here. With advent of para-humans, nobody wanted to touch Africa. The Western world saw a rise in villains, and their heroes had a hard enough time keeping their monsters in check to be willing to care about the monsters in Africa. He was grateful that when the Endbringers decided to ruin the world, capes from around the world would show up to drive of those forces of nature. Still, life went on. His father was killed, got caught in between the fight of 2 warlords' men while he was out making a delivery of an appliance he had taken home to fix. His mother couldn't handle the loss of her husband and followed him, leaving Assad alone. He got married a year down the line when he met his to-be wife while visiting houses for fixing their electrical problems, like one of those cheesy romance movies. 2 years later they were blessed with a boy, and another year later a baby girl. He was content with what he had. He learned to keep his head down and never antagonize para-humans and their lackeys. Always be respectful to your reigning warlord, but be prepared for the next one that will eventually kick the one that's in power right now. Life kicked him below the belt again when his family came down with something the foreigners called the Ebola virus. His dear wife and children were coughing up blood, vomiting whatever he tried to feed them. Their bodies grew so hot that simply sitting next to them made him feel hot, and yet they shivered as though they plunged in ice. Most of the days they were not lucid enough to talk to him, simply uttering gibberish in pain. He didn't have the money to treat them and knew nobody who would lend an electrician money to take them to a city for a chance to get them diagnosed. His world truly came down crashing when he learned that there was no cure for this disease, and if the patients didn't receive help early on, there was no way they would survive. His neighbors stopped helping him in the fear that they would get the disease themselves. Not that he blamed them for it, he would do the same if he were in their shoes. His savings were running out, and he hadn't worked since weeks. He had nobody to support his family if left for work. He was wondering if they should all just consume poison and end all of their sufferings at once. That's when he heard his door being banged. It was his friend Segal, the only person in the village that saved some food for him and left it outside his door whenever he could. He asked to carry his family outside the house as quickly as he could. There was a new para-human standing at the village center who could heal people. He got up and gently picked up his boy Highback and his little girl Yuba and handed them to his friend, who asked him bring his wife Waris outside. He could see a neat line of all the sick in the village, and the rest of the people were grouped up watching the miracle happen. When his turn came, he quickly walked up to the para-human, a very tall and built man who wearing Western clothing and had flames covering his face. He remembered that Western Cape didn't like to publicize their identities. Before he could beg for help, the man stopped him as if expecting such a thing and simply looked at his family. Before his eyes, his dear family started to gain color on their faces and return back to normal. Seconds later it was as if they never got ill in their lives. The Cape then glanced at him and he was suddenly filled with energy. His body suddenly felt more fit than ever, and aches and pains that he learned to put with were gone. As he knelt down to thank his savior, his friend quickly came in and pulled and his family to side to allow the others an opportunity to receive this miracle. When the elderly granny who only had her teen grandchild looking after her asked for their savior's name, he replied with a very deep and strong voice, Aries. He suddenly remembered doing a few years back doing a job at the school he graduated from. They had quite a few new books in the library. While waiting for his wage, he simply went through the covers of the book pile lying on the side. There was a book on Greek mythology which stated the names of the old gods of the Greek. Ares was the name of the god of war. Why would such a helpful person choose such a name? He didn't even ask for anything after healing and even fixing the broken village hall with a wave of his hand. He simply flew off into the distance. His friend informed him that this was not the first place he visited. He received a call that their savior had visited 4 villages and towns before this. Assad felt an odd sense of fear, a gut instinct one could say, the same that his father told him about when he saw CYOA visit Africa for the first time. Every time something good happened, bad things were coming this way to balance things out. That's how the world worked. This new Cape was not associated with any of the warlords in the continent, perhaps not even a native of Africa, and there was no way that the warlords would allow such a useful Cape freedom. He prayed that the Cape would stay safe and prayed that his family wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. His prayers went unanswered. His village came under the territory of warlord Yasir. Due to facing heavy competition from warlord Burhan and constantly face loss of resources by the guerrilla forces of warlord Megan, he had turned even more ruthless, conscripting every able person regardless of gender, impose heavy taxes and force any para-human into his service. His family was somewhat safe as this village was remotely located and only the tax collector came every month for tax collection. When Yasir heard there was a Cape who heal even the most ill of people, he wanted such a man under his thumb. He sent out his people by the droves to every single village the Cape visited to find out who and where this new Cape was. It was his bad luck the Yasir's lieutenant Mali decided to visit his village. This man was a cold-blooded killer whom Yasir trusted to handle internal matters while he fought against outside forces. So you guys say that you don't know anything about the man who's been flying around in our territory without giving us any respect? Please my lord, believe us, the new Cape came out of nowhere and only asked for sick. He healed the people and fixed the village hall and the warehouse and simply left my lord. He said his name was Ares when a villager asked for it. But that's he did my lord, please I beg you for mercy, our village chief begged, kneeling, face on the ground, like the rest of us, all kneeling down with soldiers surrounding the village with guns. Bah, tell me something I don't know. It's what he does in every single village or town he goes to. Some guy at the town uploaded a video of the man healing you worthless being to the internet. That's how we found out about it. Can you believe it? A new Cape in town and none of you even informed the lord. Such treason! We protect you worms form those bastards Burhan and Megan, and this is how you repay us. You backstabbing traitor! Screamed Mali as rained down kick after kick on the back of the chief, his wife and children being held down by soldiers as they begged him to stop. Your wife seems lively enough he mocked the village chief as he pulled him of the ground by pulling his hairs. Maybe I should ask her if she knows anything about the new Cape, he taunted. PP please my lord, I beg you, we are really don't know anything. Please forgive my wife, she doesn't know any better, the chief stuttered out in pain, bleeding all over the ground. My lord please leave Gauhun, he really doesn't know anything, if you beat him any more he'll die my lord, please show mercy. "I'll do anything, my lord, please mercy," screamed his wife Aussie. "Chuckle, it looks like she's the one with the balls in the family, hey? Since you're so useless and your wife is ready to do anything, maybe we should test it out, boys." "Sir, yes sir," came out roar of all the surrounding men. Just as he thought the worst was about to happen, the radio in their truck came to life. "Is anybody there? Why? Come in. The new cape's here." He killed everyo hissed. Just like that, everything quietened down, the village filled with the static of the radio. "What is this? Men! Prepare yourselves, he must have taken the other village in an ambush, we'll show this guy we mean business," shouted out Molly, but nobody paid him any attention because floating above them in the sky was the cape they were just talking about. When Molly finally noticed him mid-air, his skin started to turn red as he grew in size, 2 more arms sprouting from underneath his first set of arms, his face looking hideously ugly and 2 giant horns protruding from his head. "So you finally showed yourself. Once I'm done with you, nobody's ever gone shh," interrupted Ares, and Molly suddenly lost his voice. He was holding his throat, his maw moving wildly, but no sound came. His arms and legs suddenly started to bloat up, his already ugly body started to look like he was an ugly bruise, and then he just popped like a balloon, spraying blood and gore everywhere. Pandemonium filled the village as the soldiers and villagers alike started to scream in terror. A few of them opened fire at Ares, but he simply stayed mid-air, bullets deflecting of him. One of Molly's cape grew out claws and jumped high into the air, slashing down at Ares. Once his claws touched him, they shattered into pieces, causing the cape to fall down in pain. The cape and the surrounding soldiers started to shrivel up into mummies like the ones you hear about from Egypt, except these men kept shriveling and shriveling until they simply turned to dust. All this time Ares simply stood mid-air with his arms folded. He now understood why he named himself after the god of war. He chose to heal with his powers, to help people, but his powers were always meant to wage wars, and he is definitely not afraid of using them for that. Once again he glanced at the villagers and healed everybody and simply left. Yasir may not know it yet, but he pissed of the wrong cape this time. "I should have visited the villages again first thing in the morning. I knew that there would be retaliation from these warlords for doing what I want, but I underestimated their stupidity. These men had quite the head start on me, they reached the villages even before I left for the bay. Well, that was the last location, now to track down this Yasir. Somalia will have to survive with just 2 warlords from here on out, because I'm not letting this one get away. The only thing these people understand is a show of force. If that's what they want, then I'll give it to them." I continue heading towards the more developed parts of Yasir's territory. "He's around here somewhere, there, he's addressing the people of this city. And you can all sleep well during night because I spill my blood, sweat and tears for my people to keep animals like Burhan and Megan out of this area. It is from my blessings that there is civility in this country. Savages like those 2 don't know how hard it is outside Somalia. Once this new healing cape swears his fealty to me, all of Somalia will prosper. I have to give it to the guy, he's quite the optimist." Before even finding out the status of the men he said to hunt me down, he's already preparing to make Somalia great again. "Ah, it seems the people have noticed me. See children, the man of the hour is here. Come down, child, join me on the stage. We have a lot of work to do once you have taken me as your lord before the children of Somalia," bellowed Yasir into the mic. "I wonder how I should kill them. There are 5 capes here including Yasir, 3 simply keeping an eye on me while a tinker and who I presume to be a blaster are pointing their gun and fingers at me respectively. I already tested biological manipulation through psychokinesis before. I turned people into living cancer, tumors, and even disintegrated their cells. Anything organic can now be targeted from entire city blocks away in so many ways that it's not even funny. I guess I'll test out my energy manipulation here, should freeze, burn, disintegrate or try out something exotic. Maybe rip their molecules apart with manipulation or crush them with gravitational energy. This ability of mine is simply too varied to choose from. It seems they found out the fates of people they sent after me. Yasir's frothing from his mouth like a rabid dog screaming at his men to open fire, bullets, RPGs, electric bolts, and some kind of super high-velocity round that Tinker Tech gun fired all rained down upon me at once. Not that it did anything to me. Yasir himself is roaring at me with some kind of Tinker-made megaphone in his hand, probably helps increase the effectiveness of sound manipulation, not that it works either. I created a null zone around me with PK that simply neutralized the sound waves before they even reached me. I think I'll take inspiration from Darkseid for this. I locate each of target via my senses, charge my energy and let loose. Two thin beams of superheated light exit my eyes, piercing through every target in a zigzag manner at speeds so high that everyone seemed to die at the same time. What a waste! Had he kept his head down I truly wouldn't have bothered with him, but I didn't heal all those people to have them simply die on me. The people below stop screaming when they realize that the warlord and his men are dead and are looking at me as though I'm going to be killing them next. I don't bother with them and take off, might as well see what else the continent has to offer. I sensed plenty of cameras on, so it's fair to expect that world will be seeing my crueler side soon enough. I also sensed some extremely small devices, what I imagine to be the product of a tinker, not only here but also at a few of the villages. It seems Cauldron or some other organizations predicted the warlord's behavior and had them installed overnight to gather data. I hope they are pleased with what they learn and stay out of way. Is too much to ask for some privacy in this world? Maybe I too should start building observation tech and spread them around the world, only to help me stay up to date when I'm at the cave so that another incident like today's is avoided in the future, something to think about when I get my charges back. I cross the country of Ethiopia and enter the borders of South Sudan when I hear a loud siren wailing. Is that an Endbringer alarm? I don't remember much of the story of Worm, but I don't think any of them attacked Africa in 2011. Did things change because of me? But then what about the complication from the CYOA? Do I need to face two of them in a row? I keep pondering as I slowly make my way towards the alarms to see a huge crowd of people orderly make their way away from somewhere, perhaps a little too orderly for an Endbringer attack. I then remembered that Africa is home to another walking force of nature, the ash beast. He roams around the continent at slow enough speeds to be avoided by the people, but devastates the area once he passes through. I have quite the luck to see my first S-class threat, the top tiers in this world. I open my senses to the world and my energy sense picks up a large amount of energy being expelled and being converted into matter and then vice versa. My hearing picks up loud explosions and my telekinetic sense creates a three-dimensional real-time map in my head which picks up the presence of the man-thing in question and an armed force alongside capes observing the situation from a distance. I can see through the hill and way that it's going in a different direction, so I fly over it and slowly approach the beast. The observers took note of presence and started to shout at me to get away. While I appreciate their sentiment, I would like to observe this thing more closely. If I'm not wrong, then the man who is now called Ash Beast has been subsumed by the shard that took him as host. I think it was called a broken trigger by the author of the series, or maybe that was something else. Even with his perfect mental abilities, he can't remember something he never remembered in the first place. He was close enough to feel the fire and ash rolling off from him even though I was still about 40 meters away from him. He truly lived up to his name, devastating the area with claws made of fiery energy. The man within the explosion itself looked extremely healthy, a tall and somewhat macular African man who didn't seem like he was living without any food or water since he triggered. His eyes though were dead, glazed over. He wasn't truly present here, just a meat puppet for the shard to dance around as it pleased. The beast turned his head towards, finally noticing someone alive within its kill zone. He growled out as the intensity of his explosions got even wilder. The shard would not tolerate any challenge to its authority. Within the continent of Africa, not even the strongest warlord Muradnag dared to challenge it. It crouched low to the ground, shape-shifting into a more feral form and shot at me at high speeds. His fiery energy claw materialized to tear through me, but it does nothing, not even breaking through the field that surrounds me constantly. Once he got close enough, I punched hard enough to create shock waves that shook up the air, and he shot back down to earth even faster than he jumped up at me, creating a gigantic crater, shaking the ground below. By now our observers ran away far enough from us, understanding that getting in between here will only lead to their deaths. I could see the shock on their faces. No one has ever survived being near the beast, much less punch it in the face with enough force to tear the earth. The beast was missing a large part of its torso, its head simply hanging by a thread of whatever was left of its neck, not that it kept the beast down, as it started regenerating fast enough to combat ready in a few seconds. I got down to the ground and began walking towards it as it exited the crater, screeching like an animal and running on all fours at me. It shape-shifted again, this time to an even bulkier and larger form to stand up against my blows. It created about 15 different claws of energy to attack me. It's sad, but I'm a natural counter to the thing. My energy manipulation and psychokinesis are simply too powerful and varied to be stopped by any other energy user in this world other than Zion. I create a null zone with PK that automatically disperses the attacks before it could even approach me. It halted on its tracks, seeing the ineffectiveness of the attacks, and starts tearing pieces of the ground and chucking them at me at high speeds. I simply create disintegrating blasts to intercept them, erasing them before they even reach halfway through. It's time to end this little game. I slightly bend forward and run to it so fast that the shard hasn't caught up with my movement yet, and punch it again. It goes flying into the distance, breaking the sound barrier as it's thrown with enough force that it's unable to move. I appear behind its back and kick it into another direction, and then appear behind it again, punching it. The ground tore up from the shock waves, and the air is constantly filled with sonic booms so loud that our observers are running even further from here. By now the beast is struggling to regenerate and looks more like a ball of flesh rather than a humanoid. I kick it one last time into the sky and launch a pillar blast so large it lights up the surrounding area for miles together. The blast punches a hole in the sky and goes outside Earth's atmosphere into the space outside. Once the light show finishes, all that can be seen is a cloudless sky, no ash beast in sight. The soldiers in capes are looking at me with such fear that most of them are unable to even stand properly. If they feared me before, I wonder what they must think of me now. This was a decent warm-up. I should go back to Mars now and brawl for a bit against the energy construct to get work up some sweat. Thanks for watching.